this morning. So I finally went through with it and shaved the beard off. It was one of those really important life decisions. You know, I felt like I grew up a little bit by shaving it. It'll go back though one day. But I feel the wind on my face now, which is something I don't feel all the time. So. But I'm more approachable this way. I'm not as scary looking, which is sometimes a good thing.
Didn't find any little critters when you shaved it off.
No, I didn't. I thought maybe I'd find a rat or something, but there was nothing up in there, so it's all good. Speaking of little critters, I got two very funny stories for you, okay? So I'm cleaning up my yard, moving some stuff out. I have an old camper that's been sitting there since I moved into my house. And decided I'm going to clean it out, and I'm going to get rid of it because it's just scrap, it's just garbage. It leaks, the doors are falling off, so I'm just going to toss it, right? So I'm in the front of the camper cleaning some stuff out, taking some trash out. Desiree and TJ are in the rear of the camper. And all of a sudden I hear a blood-curdling scream. I'm not going to do it for you, but I hear a blood-curdling scream. I look back, I see Desiree jumping out of the camper, okay? She leaves her son in the camper. So she just screamed, and I'm thinking, snake? Spider maybe? No. Little bitty kitty cat. She sees a little bitty kitty cat, and it's like, it's the end of the world. It's the biggest monster she's ever seen, which was hilarious. So we clean the camper out. I end up finding 2 more kittens living in the camper. I take them out, I go put them in one of the little dog kennels, until I get the camper, done what I'm doing. I go back and put them in the camper because they're still, you can tell that they're still on their mom. They're not ready for food or whatever. I want to just let them run the neighborhood because a lot of dogs run around. I really don't want to get killed. I'm not really a cat person, but kittens are cute. If a cat would stay a kitten forever, I'd probably get one. So I go back outside to move the kittens into the camper until I move the camper out. And there's this one really cute one, he's got stripes on him. He's just adorable little kitten. I take it inside. She's laying on the couch studying. I go and I hold the cat right up close to her face. She turns, screams, jumps up off the couch. Again, hilarious, scared the same cat she was scared of earlier in the day. So, that made my day yesterday. I told her I was going to embarrass this morning, so that's what we get. All right, this morning we're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I think I'm going to read verse 22 through the end of the chapter. A few more verses than I usually read, but it's a very good story. So then David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage and ran into the army and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion of the Philistines of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Had ye seen this man that is come up, surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab the eldest brother heard, and when he spake unto the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and thy naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, and spake after the same manner. And the people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed him before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine, to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. And David said to Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went after him, and smote him, and delivered him out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put a helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David. And the man that bare his shield went before him. And when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he had disdain for him, for he was but a youth, and a ruddy, and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said to David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Philistines arose and came, that David drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. Now that's important there. Okay? The stone sunk into his forehead, and Goliath fell face forward to the dirt. Okay, we'll come back to that. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and of Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines until thou come to the valley, to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Shaaraim, and unto Gath, and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistines, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son the stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Let's pray. Father God, we love you, Lord. We thank you for today, Lord. I pray that you speak through me, Lord, that these words would not be mine, Lord, but they would be exactly what you want me to say, Lord. And they would reach somebody today, Father God. We love you. Amen. Face your giants, or I could say, facing your giants, slaying your giants, getting rid of your giants, taking out the trash. Everybody has giants in their life. Nobody's immune to giants. Now, when I say giants in your life, and I'm talking about insurmountable problems and issues. Okay? Insurmountable problems and issues. We live in a world where people's lives are crowded with giants that they are afraid to face. And if not confronted, these giants will rule our lives. So what are the giants in your life? Fear? Pride? Envy? Gluttony? Lust? Alcoholism? Pornography? Hate? Any addiction that you allow to control you is a giant in your life. Anything that has a grip on your life other than Christ, that does not push you towards Christ, is a giant. Anything that makes you live in fear is a giant. So now we're talking about giants. I have several points here that with a story like this, it's very easy to go through, and I could have 100 points off this one story. I don't have 100 points today. I've got just a few points that I'm going to go over. But we need to get rid of the giants in our lives. Number one, David acknowledged the giant that was before the armies of the Lord. Let me go back a little bit, okay? We got this young shepherd boy, David. Young, ruddy lad. And his father gives him food, says, take this down to the army, give this to your brother, and give this cheese to the captain. And David does exactly like his father says, obeying his father. And he gets down there, and he sees this giant standing out in front of the army of the Lord. Now, if you go back, the Bible says they were there for 40 days and nights. And every day this giant, Goliath, would come and say, send me out your champion. If your champion kills me, we'll be your servants. If I kill your champion, you'll be our slaves. 40 days, the same thing, Goliath would go out and he would defy the armies of the Lord. And every day, the armies of Jerusalem, the army there, would shake in their armor. They would be so scared, they wanted to ignore him, but I'm guessing his voice was so booming that every day. But you got this young lad, David, and he goes and he sees this giant. What was the first thought in his head? He says, oh my goodness, I better get back home. That's a pretty big giant. I gotta go hide. I didn't bring any weapons with me. No, the first thought in his head is somebody gonna stop that guy? Is somebody gonna do something about him? Hey, why are you letting him talk bad about God? Why are you letting him defy God? Why are you letting him bash and talk and curse us? Is someone going to do something? David had guts. Man, for a young lad, he had guts. And to see this huge giant with this huge armor and this huge spear and a shield bearer in front of him cursing the arms of the Lord, and David was like, yo, someone take care of this guy. Do something about it. So we get a little bit of backstory there. David acknowledged the giant. He brought attention to what everybody else was trying to ignore. In order to overcome your giants, you must first acknowledge your giants. You can't overcome something in your life if you're denying that it exists. Back when I drank, back when I was a drunk, I could not overcome that until I admitted, yeah, I had a problem. Until it got to the point where I had to hit my knees and I had to beg God, Lord, I can't do this. You're never going to overcome your giants in your lives and the obstacles in your life if you don't admit that they're there. And that's the first thing that David does when he goes down there and sees Goliath, is he acknowledges, hey, there's something here, there's a problem, somebody's got to take care of this. You'll never overcome the giants in your life, the things that drag you down, the things that hold you down, the things that keep you away from God, if you do not acknowledge that they first exist. The entire army of God was there, and they were so scared, they were shaking and trying to pretend that Goliath didn't exist. When this young man goes and sees Goliath and says, hey, somebody do something! He shouldn't be talking bad about my God. So first of all, we have to acknowledge the giants in our life. Number two, don't focus on the size of the giants that you're facing. David did not focus on how big Goliath was. I'm sure if you would have,
sunken back inside himself, didn't have faith in God, and just focused on the size of Goliath, but he might have gotten scared. He may not have been so outspoken. He may have ran back home to his dad and went back out to the field with the sheep where it was safe. But he didn't focus on the size of Goliath. He saw Goliath, and all he saw was somebody who needed to be dealt with. He didn't see this huge guy there with this huge armor. He saw a problem. And he said, we need to take care of this problem. David instead focused on the size of his God. We serve a big God. We serve a powerful God. We serve a God that created all of existence in 7 days. 6 days, 7th day he rested. We serve a God that the Bible tells us owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. We serve a God that, thinking back to it, when Sodom was taken into captivity and Lot was taken, what happened? Abraham took his servants. And what did Abraham do? Abraham went and fought off the opposing king. The opposing army. Abraham fought it off with his servants. We have a God that can take a nobody and make him to a somebody. I mean, come on. Nowadays, you wouldn't think that, a town of farmers, which is what they were back in the day, Abraham's servants were all farmers, you wouldn't think that a town of farmers would be able to fight off an entire army. But that's what did. Because Abraham had faith in God. We serve a big God. We serve a God that can do anything. We serve a God that can fulfill our utmost prayers. We serve a God that anything that we want, he could give it to us. David focused on how big God was and not how big the giant was. The moment you start focusing on how big the problem is in front of you is the moment you get discouraged. And the more discouraged you are, the more likely you are to not face that giant, to not solve that problem, to let that problem consume more and more of your life until it consumes all of you and you become nothing. Number 3. Whenever you point out the giants in front of you, someone will always try to discourage you. What happened here? David gets down there and he says, hey, somebody do something about this giant. And what happens? His oldest brother says, what are you doing? Why are you down here? I know your pride. I know the naughtiness of your heart. Immediately, somebody that was closest to David, who should have been encouraging him, starts to scold him and get on his case. You just go back home. You should be tending the sheep. Why are you even here? Every time you start to face a giant in your life, there's going to be somebody close to you, somebody around you that's going to discourage you from that. When I told you the story, we moved back to Texas. My wife, leaving the property we're staying on because things weren't working out. Her going to live with my grandmother, me staying there. The friend that I was staying with, of all the things that Frank could say, says, you don't need to go back to your wife. You don't need to go with your wife. You need to just stay here. She's not good for you. There's nothing wrong with you drinking. There's nothing wrong with the life you live. You're okay the way you are. The world would love for you to stay just like the world. But God calls us to come out and to be different. And the moment you start to try and better your life, there's somebody from the world that you're close to that's going to try and drag you back. No, you don't need to quit drinking. We have so much fun when we drink. We have so much fun when we go partying. Not like you guys go out and party. But the moment you try and face that giant, you've acknowledged it, you see how big your God is, and you're ready to knock that giant out, take care of that giant, somebody's going to be there and say, no, you don't need to do that. Just come keep hanging out with us. Come and do this. You don't need to get rid of that giant in your life. That giant, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Stay like us. Keep hanging out with us. Of all the people closest to David that could have encouraged him, his eldest brother discouraged him and scolded him. You shouldn't be here. Go home. He was jealous of the boy. He'd been there 40 days seeing the same giant. Not once did he speak up about it. Because he was scared. Who won't be short by the little brother? The youngest of them. But every time you're ready to face that giant, somebody's always going to try and drag you down. There's always that one person that's like, no. Just stay here. Don't worry about what others are going to think about you. You don't need to follow where others are trying to lead you. You need to follow where God's trying to lead you. You don't need to worry about the person trying to discourage you. You need to worry about what God is trying to encourage you to do. The path that God is trying to carry you. If David would have gotten discouraged by what his brother said, Goliath would still be alive. We'd have a great story to tell. But David did not listen to his younger brother, his older brother. He said, what have I done? Is it not a cause? He said, I'm not doing anything wrong here. I came down to bring stuff to you like Dad said, and I see this. If I was David, I'd be like, you've been here 40 days. Don't tell me something. Don't tell me that I'm prideful. You've been here 40 days and you still let this guy talk bad about God. Do something. David didn't say that. Is there not a cause? Somebody do something. Next. Don't fear your giants. While the army of God was shaking and we're all afraid of Goliath, David trusted in God. David rallied the troop by saying, is there not a cause? We all have giants we have to face. And we cannot let our giants instill fear in us. Just like David, we have to trust in God. That God is going to take care of the giants in our life. No matter what they are. No matter if it's a money problem. Money problems are big giants that everybody faces. I have faced money problems. There's stuff in my life right now that I'm going through that I'm like, God, I don't need to worry about this. It's in your hands, God. This is my giant. I don't want to deal with this. I can't deal with this, God. It's in your control. But we can't let our giants instill fear in us. We can't become afraid of the things that are in front of us. We can't let that fear control our lives. Because once fear controls our lives, once our giants control us, we are useless. We're useless. I think of a lot of Christians that I used to know, people that I went to school with at one point in time, that were Christians, and now they've let fear so control them that they're doing nothing for God. I was like that. I let fear control me. I let what a man said to me control me to the point where I wanted nothing to do with Christ. I wanted nothing to do with the Bible. But I had to face my giant one day. And I had to throw that giant out. And maybe where God is leading me is because I have to face that giant. Maybe where God is leading me is because that giant's still there, although it's not right in front of me, but it's something that I need to face in my life. Next, run toward your giants. David did not run away from the battle like others did. He ran towards it. By running toward your giants, you are facing them with courage. David never doubted that God would defeat Goliath. He believed strongly enough that God would intervene, so God did. When Saul called David to his tent, Saul tried to discourage David. You're just a kid. You can't do anything. David said, look, David, look. I beat a lion. I killed him. A bear came up. I killed him. Let me do this. I can do this. When the king should be the one out there fighting the giant, fighting Goliath. And the king was so scared. So Saul gives David his armor. David says, I've never used this. I've never trained with this. I can't use this, king. Takes it all off. What does he go out there with? So smaller armor? No. Just his clothing. Has a sling in his hand. Grabs 5 smooth stones. And the Bible says he ran toward Goliath. He didn't slowly say, I'm going to face this giant. I'm going to face this giant. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to face this. I got to face. No. David said, all right, giant, let's do this. I'm going. Just like that. He ran towards the battle. Fearless. Courageous. Not a bit of doubt in him. If he had doubted God even a little bit, he would have ran the other way. But he didn't. He had 100% confidence and faith in God, and he ran towards the battle. We cannot run from our giants. We cannot timidly approach our giants. We have to stand with confidence and boldness and say, I'm facing you, giant. You're not going to control my life anymore. We have to run towards our battles. Run towards them. Full speed ahead with confidence. We might not be able to do it, but God can do it. And David ran towards Goliath. He ran towards the battle. Didn't once turn back. You know, there's a saying, to surround yourself with people that run towards the sound of gunfire. Because when it hits the fan, you won't be let down. Gunfire used to scare the snot out of me. Doesn't much anymore. I hear a big boom outside. I'm like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? Everything okay? Oh no, I'm good. Fireworks. We can't be afraid of our battles. We have to have confidence. Doesn't matter how much we've messed up. Doesn't matter what we've done in our lives. We have to have confidence that we are children of God. And that God is going to get us through any battle that we come up against. I saw a quote the other day that says, God gives his toughest battles to his strongest soldiers. Amen. He must think I'm strong. I don't feel strong sometimes, but God must think I'm strong. See, David grabbed a sling and a stone. He ran towards the giant with 100% confidence that God was going to deliver him, and he did. I want to bring something out to you here, okay? Remember I stopped and said that the stone didn't just hit his forehead? It said the stone sank into the giant's forehead. And it says Goliath fell face first in the dirt. Now let me point something out to you here, okay? Even if you're standing still and somebody hits you from the front, which way do you fall? You fall back. If you're running and somebody hits you from the front, what happens? You fall back. I have a theory. Here. I'd probably put money on it, okay? David was running with that stone, and David's not superhuman, okay? If you ever throw a stone at somebody, it's going to hurt them. It's not going to sink into their head. But David's running with that stone and sling. He's running. He lets it loose. The stone comes flying at Goliath. I think God said, all right, Goliath, the time's over. God hits Goliath in the back of the head. The stone sticks to his head, falls face first in the dirt. Woo-hoo! That's exciting to me. That's exciting. God was there 100%. God didn't say, I'm going to let this go all the way to the end. No, God said, bye, Goliath. Bam! Boom. I love the story. So there's no other explanation. Goliath should have fallen backwards, but he didn't. God said, your time's over, buddy. My servant David's here. Time to end. When others see you overcoming your giants, they will be empowered to face their own giants. This should really hit you. As Christians, everybody is watching us. The world loves to make fun of Christians. The world loves to see Christians fail. But as a child of God, when you face that giant, you look that giant in the eye, you take your sling and stone, you sling it at him, and that giant falls down dead, and everybody around you sees it, man, your brothers and sisters in Christ are like, you know what? I can do it too. I can do it too. The Bible tells us that as soon as that giant was on the ground, it said the armies of Israel rallied together. Woo, yeah! The giant's dead! Let's do this! The armies went and chased. It said the army of the Philistines ran off. The army of God chased after him. They chased him as far as they could. They killed him. They came back and they spoiled their chances. It means they went and they looted him. They took armor. They took weapons. They took gold. They took food. When you face your giant and you knock that giant dead, everybody around you is watching you. And as soon as that happens, I can do it too. I can do it too. You know what? That was a big giant he was facing. I can do it too. My giant's not that big. It's not that bad. I can do it too. Never give up. Never let the giants take control. Never let the giant face you down. You gotta face that giant. You gotta look at him square in the eye, and you gotta encourage the ones around you. The Bible tells us that David went up and he stood in the body of Goliath, not having a sword of his own. He took Goliath's sword and he cut Goliath's head off. There's a lot of different speculations as to why. I think he took it as a trophy. I do. I think he took it as a trophy. They used to hang heads of their enemies on trees and on stakes to warn people, look, I killed this guy. Don't mess with him. I think he took it as a trophy. The Bible also says that he took Goliath's armor. Now what's a young little dude going to do with a giant's armor? If we go back and we read into 2 Samuel, we find later that David is in the town of, we get the name wrong, Cobb or Nob. And he says, I don't have a sword or a spear. I need something to fight with. And the priest says, oh hey, Goliath's sword is here. Why don't you use it? David says, yes, there is not another like it. Back then, if you killed somebody in war, you were entitled to everything they had, their armor, their weapons, the gold, everything they had with them, you were entitled to it. And being that the Philistines would not allow blacksmiths into Israel, the army of God couldn't make new weapons or armor or anything. So being able to take this armor was good. But I believe that David had that armor, and I believe he had that head, and I believe that in the future when he was facing other giants and discouragement, disappointment, I believe he looked at that and said, you know what? God was with me when I faced Goliath. He's going to look with me right now. I ain't going to worry about this. I have the faith and the confidence and trust that God's going to see me through this one as well. We need to have the same attitude facing our giants. Remember last week I said you don't need to let your past successes define you. But you can draw on those past successes. And remember, God brought me out of this. God's going to bring me through this as well. And I believe that's what David was doing. I believe every time he looked at it, he was encouraged. And if you remember, David was chased by Saul later in life. Saul wanted to kill him. He was having to hide in caves with crooks and convicts. David lived a lot of discouragement in his life. But he didn't give up. We have to draw on our past successes. We have to draw on our past victories to keep us encouraged for the future. And lastly, verse 47. David says to Goliath, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. There will not be a giant in your life that you cannot face as long as you trust in God. Now, I'm not saying, well, God, I kind of sort of trust you, but I'm still unsure. I'm talking 100% confidence that God's going to get you through it. As long as you have 100% confidence in God, unwavering faith, God is going to see you through everything you face. Every giant is going to get knocked out of your path. Every time. You say, it's hard to do. No, it's really not. It's just saying, God, I can't do this. I need you to take it from me. God, I can't do this. I need you to just make this happen. God, I have no idea where I'm going to live in a month. Can you make it happen? God, I have no idea how I'm going to make this next car payment. Can you make it happen? God, I have no idea if my crops are going to make it this season, but if I sit and worry about it and stress over it, I'm not going to amount to anything. So please, God, it's in your hands. Make it happen. God has brought me through so many things in my life. Sometimes I can't help but to say, yeah, I got this. You know what's funny though, boys? It's easy for me to trust out big things. The small things in life. And I'm like, God take care of that? Can God really pull me through this? I have, I'm flesh, I have a lot of confidence in myself. And these small things, I'm like, I should be able to handle this, God. Can you really take care of it for me? And God's like, Are you serious, Tony? Are you being for real? I'm like, oh, that's right, God. You got this. Take my hand off the wheel. I'm good. Do your thing. It doesn't matter what giants we face in our life, as long as we have confidence in God, He's going to see us through every single one. Just like David here. I pray that no matter what giants you face in your life, that you always have the confidence that God is going to get you through. No matter what battle comes against you, no matter what you're facing, no matter what's in your life trying to drag you down, I pray that you always have the confidence that God is going to see you through. Let's pray. Father God, we love you, Lord. Thank you for today, Lord. Thank you for this Bible that we have, Lord, for your word, Lord, for the encouragement that we can find in the life of David, Lord, and in the story of David's life, Lord. May we always look to you to take care of our giants, Lord. Not look to ourselves, not to have confidence in our own flesh, Lord, but to have confidence in you that you are going to see us through everything that we come up against. Every giant that we face, you're going to knock down. Every wall on our path, you're going to breach. And every gap, you're going to bridge for us, Father God. We love you and thank you, Lord. Amen. All right, everybody have a great week.